Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez, and today I'm going to talk about training in other places. I did write the book Serious on the Rare Earth Sting based on my trips to Okinawa, and I also did the Off the Rails, which is a book where I went by train from San Diego up to Oakland, and I managed to train with different styles. Now, when I do this, I will tell you that there are certain things that seem to be welcomed when I do it, and certain things that seem people really don't want to have. And so that's one of the things to realize is that, you may think that you're doing everything great, but there are things that you really should do and before you actually go visit people. Now, I love training with every other person, any style. I don't care. I know that if I go somewhere, I'm going to learn something that I didn't have before. Now, there are sometimes I go to a place and I don't come out with anything that I would use, but I see a new art. Other times I come out and it's like, oh, I'm going to use this. And there are some people who ask me, well, aren't you changing your art? And the answer is, well, there's actually two ways to answer it. One is, I don't change my art. I change different drills that I might do, but if the drills work, why wouldn't I? And the other thing I would say is, well, my teacher, my late teacher, Thomas Sensei, actually said something to me, and I always mention it. I've actually mentioned it more and more every day. And that is, he told me he was teaching me his art, but it's my obligation to actually find my art and teach my own art. What I got that to mean is, he's going to teach me techniques and how to do stuff, but I have to actually go out and find new ways to do stuff that work specifically for me because I'm not Taba Sensei. So that's actually one of the biggest differences. Uh, the other thing is I love traveling, and if you travel with martial arts, everywhere you go, you actually have a friend in the city. So let's say when I went to L.A., I do have friends there, but I also ended up meeting some of the people at Santos Academy, which if you're in L.A., I recommend going. It's a great place. Uh, and what ended up happening is I met good people there. Actually, me and one of the gentlemen there ended up going for dinner afterwards, just talking about martial arts, which was a lot of fun, seeing actually how all the similarities and differences. Now, there are some people who would say, "Oh, well, no, I don't train with anyone other than my own style and sensei because I do not want to ruin my martial art." Uh, yeah, let's just say this. Imagine if you're a chef that says he only eats at his restaurant because he doesn't want to ruin his cooking techniques by going to another restaurant. Now, the truth is, everything, everything you do in martial arts, everything you do in life can help your martial arts. And martial arts actually can help you in a lot of stuff in life. So, for those people who don't train somewhere because they're afraid it's going to ruin their martial art, all I gotta say is you probably already drank the Kool-Aid, didn't you? Let you guys determine what that means later if you don't know. So the thing is, you can always learn stuff. And in the book Off the Rails, I actually mentioned how I went in Santa Barbara. I managed to train with a gentleman who taught capoeira, and now I've stolen, like borrowed, I guess I should say stolen, because he taught it to me, and he said it was okay for me. But I've used the Jinga from capoeira to teach students footwork, and I haven't found anything that works quite as well as that. I've also started mixing certain things up. I'm not teaching capoeira, but I am stealing one of their drill. I am borrowing one of the drills that they taught me. And so there's a lot of benefits to actually going out and training with other people. Now, when you do this, always remember there's a couple things to remember. One is remember you're a guest. And so even if you disagree with the way they do stuff, take it. It's yours. You don't have to do it that way when you get home. But for now, while you're there, whatever they tell you to do it the way they tell you to do it, because it's a new way to do it. You may not use it later, but at least you'll be able to use it there and see if it works for you. Now, if you are doing the travel and training together, before you actually do that, there's something I recommend you do. Now, that is call the places you want to train in. So On the trip off the rails, I wanted to see as many different martial arts as I could, and so I called and I asked, look, what do I need to train with you? Most of the places it's like, oh, just show up. We'll give you a free first lesson. It doesn't matter. Now, I didn't show up to the free first lesson and just take the first lesson. It's like, hey, thanks. Time to go. I actually brought little gift cards. Just like the gift certificate to Starbucks. Everyone loves coffee, right? And if not, they have tea. And I use that as thank you gifts. Some places will tell you, oh, well, we charge X amount. Well, the nice thing about knowing that is you know how much you're going to be charged. And so it's not a surprise at the end. Now, the other thing is some people would tell you to use whatever you normally use to train in. And so, in Jenga, they told me just to wear my a t-shirt, and if I had a karate pants, I could use those. I did, and it worked great. There were other schools where they had other uniforms. And the ones that had other uniforms, a lot of times they said, well, if you're just coming here for one day, come in with t-shirt and shorts. Some of them have specific things because they want to have the uniformity, and so these places may say, oh, well, you need to buy a special t-shirt with our logo because we want to keep everything uniform, and that's fine. Now, depending on how much you're charged, your gift doesn't have to be as much. So, for instance, if you're not getting charged, you might want to give a, let's say, $40 gift card to Starbucks. If you're being charged $10, okay, drop it down to 30. And you can actually modify it based on that. Now, some people might say, well, wow, that's a lot of money, but, to train. But remember, it's like these people are spending, especially if they're spending their time with you afterwards. A lot of times people will, when you show up, they'll come in before, they'll teach you basics so you can actually catch up with the class, and they'll talk to you after class, and you can end up finding out what a lot more about their art. You can start learning about the history of the arts, and a lot of the history of the arts is just fascinating. And so that's one of the big things to do is call, see how much it is, what you need, and make sure everything that you are using is clean. Now, one of the things that I have noticed is most schools, they'll let you go barefoot. There are some schools which will say, oh no, we want you to wear tennis shoes, different shoes, or we may, and that's fine. If you know ahead of time, you can prepare. Now, with that said, I will say this. One of the things I've realized with this travel is, first, every martial artist I met was a great person. Actually, I ended up going having dinner with a lot of the ones I actually met in the off the rails, and it was really great. It was a great trip, I will admit. And it's one thing that, like I said, a lot of people do. Now, one of the things I will mention is this. A lot of times when you're doing this trip, you start realizing certain things. One is that there are really 3 types of martial arts. You can actually classify in 3 different areas. And people say, oh no, you can't do everything. First of all, you can really only if you're specializing, you're specializing in one thing. One of the ones that you'll actually see is theatrical martial arts. Now, theatrical arts are those arts that do stuff to show off. Pretty much, they're for just like the name applies, theater. If you think of boxing being a sport martial art, most people, even people who watch boxing, a lot of times miss a lot of boxing because they don't train in boxing. They don't know what to look for. And I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in boxing, but I will say that I have noticed that a lot of times people who don't have any martial art training will talk about a fight, and you'll watch it, and you'll be like, are we seeing the same fight? Because that's completely different. And someone who boxes may even end up seeing it even more different. I remember I went to a bar where there was a boxing match. One guy I had met earlier who actually did a lot of amateur boxing matches, me and someone else, and we watched the same fight. The guy who never trained never did any boxing or martial arts, he said, oh, the refs didn't know what they were doing. Obviously, the other guy won. I kind of kept quiet, I must be honest, because I looked at it and I saw that the refs did a good job. And the gentleman who did the amateur fighting started breaking everything down, showing him how, a lot of times it's like people actually see a boxer do something like this and they think he's getting hit, but he's actually using that drop to use the arm to take the hit instead of the ribs, and that's not a point. And so he said he actually showed me pretty much how people who don't know boxing will see it. Now that said, if you think about it, in movies and boxing, it doesn't look like the boxing that you see in a match. If you watch a boxing in a movie, you'll notice that the guy comes back and does all these big arching moves, and even the jabs are shoulder coming out so people can see it. And the box are these big dramatic blocks that if anyone used those in boxing, they'd be probably knocked out in the first second. But the camera needs to be able to see these things in theatrical arts. Wushu or the wire, you'll notice that they'll do these blocks and there'll be big arching movements so the cameras and this audience can see it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're useless. What it means is they're going to exaggerate their movements. And if you wanted to do it as a self-defense, you would actually have to decrease the exaggeration of movements. In sports, you take, like I mentioned, boxing. If you tried to do a boxing match in a movie the way a real boxer fights, most people wouldn't understand what was going on. And so that's one of the big things that ends up happening is you can see the difference between sport and movies really easy. Now, before I go on, though, I will tell you that a lot of people don't realize that they are a theatrical martial art because they were sold the idea that, although this is traditional, and look, we go to tournaments and everyone wins. But if you're judged on something and its symmetry or how loud you sell the technique rather than how much power is behind it, you're in a theatrical art. It doesn't matter if it's baton twirling or if you're doing kata for a judge. If you're doing anything for effect rather than for functionality, it's a theatrical art. And I know some people are probably going to get upset at that, but it is what it is. If you're doing a sport, now it may actually a lot of times sports. Some people who do sports can actually do stuff and it looks beautiful, but sometimes things don't work so well. When you do it in sport, it doesn't look as pretty as it does in a theater. And, that's the way it is. That's not what athlete is not trying to make it pretty. They're trying to win a game. And they're trying to win a game based on rules. Now let's take self-defense. In self-defense, the rule is I get home alive and hopefully don't go to prison afterwards. That's two rules. Number one, I go home alive. Number two, hopefully I don't go to prison. That's pretty much self-defense. If you have someone who's an expert at winning a game, but they're playing the game in a self-defense scenario, it's going to be a detriment. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with that. I'm just saying that, you have to actually look at what you're actually doing. And so that's one of the big things that does happen. And there's not a problem with each. A lot of times the sport will have a lot of drills and a lot of things that work great for, if you're doing it for self-defense. Theatrical may actually have, a lot of times has stuff that you wouldn't even think about, which you can add later. You can pretty much add to any art. And so that's one of the big things that ends up happening is, you do have to look at what type of art you're doing. And if you're visiting, understand that you may be going into a theatrical art and know that, a lot of their techniques are going to be based on that. Keep your mouth shut, do it the way they tell you to do it, and that's it. Now, one of the things going back to visiting, one of the things that a lot of times happens is sometimes people want to know how you do it, how you do a certain technique, or how you teach. And so a lot of times I've actually been places where they say, so we train for maybe an hour, and the last half hour, they asked me, could you show us how you teach karate? And so, as you know that a lot of times you're going to do this, it's a good idea to have a plan of, this is what I'm going to be teaching, but realize where you're at. So for instance, if I'm in a Aikido place, I'm not going to beat their Aikido techniques with my wrist locks. So you can actually say, okay, well, we learned this technique here. We can actually modify this, and over here we can just change. Instead of coming the hand here to grab, we can actually come and get the punch in there, and that way you can actually show similarities and differences without being this is the way I do it, and it's the only way to do it. I hope you enjoyed this this video. if you want to know more about my travels on train, training martial arts, it's off the rails. It's available on Amazon. And I actually had a good time on the trip. Hopefully, if you like reading, you'll have a good time reading it. If you're interested in it and are willing to write a review on Amazon, email me and I'll see if I can send you an e-copy of it if something you'd be interested in reading. With that, I'll sign off and hope you enjoy this. Also, I really like to go into the anatomy, physiology of martial arts, but I've gotten to a point where there's only a few topics I want to do, but a lot of them require other things, and so I'm actually have to buy something, and I haven't gotten around to a lot of it. So if you have any martial art anatomy questions, I will answer it. Don't necessarily ask clinical. If you tell me, oh, I have lower back pain, what should I do to prevent it? I would tell you, go to a doctor, because you have to get tests, you have to look at things, you have to do a lot of different things. And for someone to give you advice without seeing you, anyone who gives you medical advice without physically seeing you and doing physical exam on you really isn't doing you a favor. So with that, I'll sign off. Hope you enjoy this. Please subscribe if you do. Goodbye.